Yesterday, I learned about the difference between humility and humiliation. They are not one and the same thing. Humiliation provides an opportunity for humility but does not ensure that it will occur. It's like taking the horse to the trough and expecting it to drink. Not necessarily. He'll just stand there and stare at the water if it's not interested. And I have not been interested up until now. I have been complaining over the years that I was born a black sheep in a family of liars and thieves to which I do not subscribe to. And I say that I'm a black sheep in as much as that's the way they view me and that's the way they want to view me, because I'm an embarrassment to them that I don't follow along, that I don't lie even a little to gain a little advantage. I won't get into that because that's not on the topic here. But I do have one thing in common. Every single member of my nuclear family, my father, my mother, my brother, myself, we have humongous egos. Now, I don't know anything about my father's past life because I never met him. I was a baby. And I was not in a position to assess him. Now I can. If I get involved with somebody, I'll be able to assess them and find out why is it that there's some kind of attraction to get involved in one manner or another, to help or whatever. It's due to some past lifetime just picking up where we left off, kind of deal. And it may not go anywhere in this lifetime. I've seen that happen, but on multiple occasions. But everyone in my family has a humongous ego. And there are different ways of acquiring an ego. One can say that, the easiest way, let me put it this way. Let's just stick with the easy stuff. The easiest way to acquire an ego is to get hurt and suffer pain and torture or torment or disturbance of any kind, because it clouds the mind. What it does is it shuts down our awareness of our emotions, because we don't want to go there. There's pain there. So we hide on the other side of the brain. The brain is split into two halves. It's got an emotional side, which is called gestalt because it looks at the whole picture. And that tends to be more intuitive because it gets things in pictures or in whole generalized concepts without the details mapped in. Meanwhile, the other side, the intellectual side that has to do with language and reasoning, that always starts with the details and hopefully can build something bigger. So the intellect is a bottom-up approach, amassing enough details, facts, to assemble them together into a larger picture. Meanwhile, the emotional side, which is also related to our spatial perceptions and geometry and whatnot, that takes a top-down approach, an eagle's eye view, in which you don't see the details and you don't care to. All you do is you get a general feeling of the situation, and that's good enough if you take that point of view. We can take either point of view because either point of view is translatable into the other, because there's a cable connection, a set of cable connections between the two hemispheres of the brain below these two hemispheres. That means that for every thought, there's a corresponding emotion. For every emotion, there's a corresponding thought. And that's a form of kinesiology, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I didn't know this. I had to have a client. I had to have somebody point it out to me. Because I mentioned a friend of mine that I had been nursemaiding for 2 years, an alcoholic, because I wanted to learn about alcoholics. I mean, I've heard stories about my cousin's father, but, I never met the dude, so what do I know? And I was curious, why is alcohol so important? So anyway, he's got kinesiology, but being an artist kind of person, into music and art, he can cross over some of his five senses. I don't know about all of them, but some of them. And it annoys him. He doesn't like it. Well, that's what I have. This ability, which I took to be normal, is not, apparently. Now, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras says that the easiest way to achieve telepathy with another creature is to first gain empathy with that creature. Now, I know I have telepathic abilities, but I don't get to use them because I have a weak physiology, born of a mother who was an alcoholic for the first trimesters of her gestation of me, while fasting on a raw food vegan diet. It's a terrible combination. You don't want to fast and be drunk. Everybody knows that. You got to eat some things to moderate your alcohol intake. Well, we were on a raw food vegan diet. We weren't taking in a whole lot. We didn't have superfoods back then. And it wasn't even called raw food vegan. It was called hygienic. Boy, was it hygienic. Not a whole lot of nutrition. I mean, at least they could have had sprouts or seaweed, but not even that. Oh, God. Anyway. So I can't project telepathically. But under the right circumstances, if I'm not being distracted or excited, and only from certain people who want to help and give me advice on the intuitive plane. I don't get to see them necessarily or meet with them. And nobody takes credit for it usually, because that's the way the third eye chakra works. Nobody takes credit. It's just sharing for the goodness of whomever can appreciate it. So where was I going with that? So I can receive from them, but I can't really project to anyone else who doesn't have that ability. Now, I did one day, and I know this, I'm saying this from experience. I went, at one time, 35 years ago, I was into gems and making necklaces for people, and I worked out a scheme on how to decide what gems were appropriate for them, and I was to give them away. I was not to, except one instance I was supposed to sell it, and I didn't, and I blew it. But all the other times I gave it away as a gift, and it was meant for that specific person. It was tailored. It was custom made for that person's. It has to do with the chakras and the planets and yada yada. Anyway, so I went to a gem store immediately prior to going to Spanish class at Santa Monica College. And I was having some trouble with a girl who did not really was certain whether or not she wanted to go with me. There was another guy, and we were both competing for her affection, wondering who was going to win. And the teacher was rooting for me, but as you'll see in a moment, it didn't help. So I was at this gem store, and I'm fondling. This is what you do when you want to make love to a gemstone. You fondle it in your fingertips. You roll it around. You hold it in your hand. You oogle it with your eyeballs. You don't taste it. You don't eat it, but you handle it. I call it fondling because it's a loving act to gain access to the vibratory rate of that gem, its signature. Amethyst, for instance, if you fondle an amethyst pendant on a necklace while you're praying for someone to get assistance, you're trying to invoke assistance from the angelic realm to help that person, you will get it, because I've gotten it. At least, yeah, because you're praying on behalf of somebody else, and the amethyst is very good at invoking assistance from the angelic realm. But this particular stone at this gem store was green, and it looked like molten. It looked like glass you find on the beach that's been eroded into a nice smooth curvature. Doesn't have the sharp edges anymore that it once had when it was broken glass. This was green colored, and it was glassy because a meteorite had hit let me see if I get this right, the Czech side of the Czech-German border, Czechoslovakia, and it melted the soil it melted itself on impact, and it all mixed up into these glassy green pebbles. And I'm busy handling this, fondling it, and very intrigued. I can't remember the name of it, but and then I left. I was there for, as long as I could stay. I didn't want to be late to class, but I allowed myself, I guess, half an hour, and I was there for a little under half an hour. So I'm busy fondling this thing. Needless to say, I go to class. I'm sitting in my seat, and the girl is to my left, one seat forward, and the guy is also on my left, but I think behind me. So there was a seat in between, I think, that he was not taking. I can't remember. Anyway, she was up ahead. So I'm thinking I'm pleading with her inside my head. Oh, please, please, choose me, choose me. And as I'm doing this, she's sliding and sinking down lower and lower in her chair until finally she falls off the chair and onto her tushy onto the floor and gets up, brushes herself off, gathers her books. This is the beginning of Spanish class in the middle of a lesson, and starts walking towards the door. And as she's about to walk out the door, she turns to the other guy and makes a motion with her head like, come on, dude. And we never see the two of them again. And he gives me a look like, ooh, I guess she chose me. I embarrassed her because I got inside her head. And it was quite annoying to her. And the teacher just said, oh, well, she didn't say, but well, afterwards, at the end of class, she said, oh, well. And then she told me she was rooting. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you very much. It makes me feel really good. So I'm not that case. And on another occasion, I boosted my ability to project thought by consuming parsnips, of all things. So there's an herbal remedy for if you want to become more projectile in your thoughts. That's the way to do it. But I'm not into that, so I just stumbled across it. Being a meditator, I become more sensitive to these things, and I pay attention. As a little kid, I didn't pay attention to anything. I was a zombie. But this was different. Meditation wakes me up, and so I start paying attention. Anywho, so what Patanjali said was you go through the heart first before you gain the mind of the creature. So he was already saying about crossover. And for somebody in my disposition, I'm too weak to really do telepathy with most people. But empathy, I'm like a sponge. I take, the minute somebody gets, I won't get into the details. I'm a sponge. And I cultivated this, but knowing that once you turn it on, you can't turn it off. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, it's unlike telepathy. Well, I don't know. I can't speak for that. Anyway, so where was I going with all of this? Yes, back to the problem. So everybody in my family has a humongous ego. Well, so I go to visit my friend and I get a little lesson on humility. And I learn about something that helps cultivate humility. Now, Charlie Lucci would say on occasion that humility is usually the last lesson that humanity tends to leave for last, because who wants to give up their egotism, their vanity? I struggled for a goal and I worked hard and I achieved it and now I can be proud, or whatever. Or I lived through suffering and I survived. I'm a survivor. Whatever it is that boosts that ego, whether it's accomplishment of hard work or it's survival from a hard life, whatever it is, it tends to boost and feed the ego. So it's no small wonder that we have egos on occasion because, well, if life is hard or if you strive for a goal that is not like normal, like easy, then yeah, it's going to take an ego, and it's going to take a big one. Well, I had to think a bit. What? I don't bother achieving it. Oh, yeah, no, I did go through a lot of shit, didn't I? All right, so there's my ego. Now, humility is a funny thing because the technique for humility is not humility itself. That's just the benefit. The technique is something else. And I won't say exactly what the technique is, except to say that, in the olden times, we would bow and curtsy in Europe, a few hundred years ago. And we would address people by their station in life. If they had any station worth addressing. Everybody else didn't have a appendage in front of their name that you would add as you address them. But if you had a station in life, the word was added, or the phrase, and, your highness or whatever, and it was out of respect that you did that. Well, there is a technique for doing that, but I never thought it through. I never think through consequences usually. Well, I shouldn't say never, but very often, more often than not, I don't think through consequences of my actions. I just do them and see what happens. Well, this particular technique is like that, what I've described, but its benefit is humility. It actually cultivates humility because you are putting yourself in a position of paying homage to something greater than yourself, even though you may not define what that something or someone is. So it's like a verb or an adverb or an adjective without the noun. So because you're trying to create an attitude, and it doesn't matter who it's with, you just want the attitude, so you focus on the attitude. What will give you that humility of an attitude by practicing the technique. And I must say, it's what I need. I need it very badly because I do have a big ego, and I have suffered, and I keep suffering because I'm also an activist. A habit pattern picked up from a past life, but whatever. So it hasn't helped. But now I can say that I guess I must have learned my lesson. Why else would I come to know this now? I could have learned this years ago. It would save me a lot of service, as we say in the Yiddish, a lot of trouble. But no, I didn't, because I didn't have the karma for it, or I didn't have the consciousness for both. Yeah, usually it's both. So now I have the receptivity because I've been humiliated by being put out onto the streets. So I'm halfway there. So the opportunity is there, and it's been almost a year and a half now, living on the street, and so it put me in a position that I was kind of ready. I won't get into some of the other details as what really helped make me ready on top of all of that, but it became like automatic. It was just, everything just happened. I didn't have to make anything happen. It just happened. It was so effortless and natural. It shows that it was the right moment, that I had come to that moment in all the right ways so that it would be effortless to acquire the knowledge and have now the opportunity to put it into practice. And I like the benefit. I like it very much because I don't like to suffer anymore. I'm kind of tired of it. And I'm old. That too. So, anywho, so that's my recent story. Prognosis, I should say, update. And it's, I guess, a good sign of things to come, because it's one more feather in my cap, so to speak, because as much as I don't like being homeless, and as much as it has been painful at times, like starving at times, they're having to go into a Domino's Pizza and ask, anybody order a pizza and didn't pick up at the end of the day? Oh, yeah. And he fiddles around with 3 different boxes. Which one should I give him? And he chooses one. And, I'm not a meat eater. I really don't like red meat. It throws my hormones off balance. and my emotions along with it. It's a high, and then I crash, and oh God, it's disgusting. But I was so hungry, I ate the whole damn thing, pepperonis and all. It was a small, personal sized pizza. It wasn't medium or large, but all the same, it was very welcome at that moment in time, because I was starving. Oh, that's no fun. But things have been getting better, gradually, little by little. And this has been a problem for me to meditate for the last 17 years on a regular basis. Not that I wanted to stop. Trust me, I was addicted to meditation. The bliss, are you kidding? At least once a day, if not twice a day? Are you kidding? Now, who wouldn't be? I mean, after being depressed my whole childhood. I mean, this was like a saving grace. 35 years, I never had a problem with my meditation. The magic happened without any effort whatsoever. But then all of a sudden, I couldn't meditate anymore because I was like George Costanza, the character in the Seinfeld episode. George Costanza's father, one of the episodes, the camera cuts to his father for a few minutes and then goes back to the fearsome foursome. And his father is screaming at the top of his lungs, "Serenity now." And of course, that's not the way you meditate. But that's the joke. But in my case, it's not funny because I knew that, and yet that was my attitude. When you're so frustrated and so impatient and so angry at the whole world, you want to blame everyone except yourself. That's not the right attitude for meditation. So it's no small wonder I couldn't meditate without sitting there filled with anxiety. And the use of the mantra didn't make matters any better. It just got worse. So what the hell am I doing this for? I never had problems like this that I didn't get past. But I couldn't see my way through this, so I just left it alone. And once in a while, I would meditate because I could feel it, that the magic was about to happen. It just felt so natural and innocent to sit down to meditate, but it was like once in a great while. And then the magic happened. And then afterwards, I'm thinking, oh, I didn't lose the magic. And then I'd be back in the anxiety again within a day, or less. And I was like, okay, the trouble restarts. Didn't stay away too long. So 17 years, and I still have the anxiety. But this new technique that I'm finding of not trying to be such a smarty pants anymore, because that's unfortunately what that's what's funding this agony, because people hate me either because they're jealous or they're afraid or both. And it's not nice because I pick up on all of that. I'm an empath, so I pick up on what people are feeling. Whether or not I'm with them in front of my face, doesn't matter. If I have any relationship whatsoever, I will know what they are feeling before they even tell me. And then, oh, is that why I'm feeling this way? I was wondering where it was coming from. Like the time I had one roommate and 9/11 had happened that morning and I didn't want to get out of bed. I was so depressed. I did not want to get out of bed. I just laid there depressed. And my roommate's going, no, you got to come to the kitchen. You got to see what's on TV. No, you got to come. He never touched me, but he never let go of harassing me. He kept on and on and on. So just to appease him, I get out of bed, and sure enough, that's why I was depressed, because everybody else in the neighborhood was already engrossed in what was happening. And I just felt worse once I found out the source of the depression. I went back to bed. Didn't help. But he was satisfied. He gave me information that I didn't want. He didn't know. He didn't know that I was an empath, that I'm picking up on everyone's feelings and doing the translation without even trying to. So I already knew there was something bad enough that I didn't want to know the details. But that's what happens when you're surrounded by people on all sides and they're all seeing the same thing and feeling pretty much the same way. I get just swept along. It's just like automatic pilot. Anyway. Well, I guess I've run out of things to say. That's just about does it, I guess. Anyway, my latest prognosis report. I am eating better too. But it takes so much finesse, and that's a whole nother topic. So I guess I won't get into it. But that's another thing that's developed of late, is learning all the details of how I have to eat in order to appeal to my body's need for nutrition, but also its very narrow needs of what it will accept. And thank God for modern technology, because if I did what Daddy did, whole foods, it doesn't work. Not for me, not after all what I've been through. My health is so impaired that I can't do anything normal anymore. I can't even poop without a certain technique that will not create diarrhea as a consequence, no matter how much I do it, which is pretty good, because any other technique, magnesium, herbs, sinusoidal herbs, doesn't work because it gives me diarrhea. And when you're homeless living in your car, you don't want to make a mess in your car, especially when my car is my only means of an income. So, not that I haven't had on occasion to poop in my car, but believe me, it's not something you want to do. Not something I want to do. But there is a technique I found that will help me poop, because I just can't poop. It's no question about it. And it's all part of the disease process of what I've been through over the last few decades that just is taking its toll on my health by accelerating the aging process. So I got a lot of things on my plate I got to deal with. Not to mention, I don't get to meditate anymore because I'm trying to stay alive. And when this particular poisoning happened about 22 years ago, I was dying very quickly, and I had a lot of bliss boost in my meditation, because that's what happens among meditators. When you've been meditating a while, it's compensation, I suspect, for the death process, is you're given more and more bliss. And it gets pretty intense. I mean, one lady who was dying of, I believe it was a brain tumor, she never took anybody's advice, well-meaning advice, on how to deal with the cancer. And yet, she died with so much bliss because it just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Well, one evening in meditation, I'm experiencing all this bliss more intensely than usual, and watching in the subtle planes, my subtle body is dying and all messed up, and my physical body not doing too well either. And the thought struck me, you don't have to die. And I'm about to go, what? But I caught myself, because right away I realized, you're right. You're right. But there was a secondary thought that came along with that. But it will be at the cost of your bliss, if I choose to stay alive. And that's what's happened. So one could say it was about 22 years ago that I stopped being able to meditate, because the anxiety level of trying to fix the situation, woo, boy, talk about anxiety creating. So that's been one source of my anxiety, is taking upon myself the responsibility for staying alive as long as I can. Tremendous anxiety. Even though I'm doing pretty good now, because I have other sources for that anxiety leading up to that point 22 years ago that started prior to 22 years ago. So I have all these sources for anxiety. So it's been very hard to meditate. And consequently, I don't do it, because if it's not easy, why do it? It's supposed to be an easy technique. 35 years, never a hitch. But for it to all of a sudden to become difficult, then there's something wrong. And it was my massive ego. That was the problem. So that gives you a little backstory as to why it's so important that I overcome my bloated ego. It doesn't matter what I may think about myself that feeds that egotism. May be true, but so what? It's not helping me any to think that way. And now I don't have to think about it. I just do the technique and it's fine. It gets better. And I know it will. It takes time. These things take time. It's not serenity now. But it works. And I never would have dreamed of it, the possibility. I mean, I toyed with it, like I said, but I didn't understand the purpose with being more consistent than merely toying with it once in a while. And so now I know, and so now I have a reason to keep it up and be consistent. Because, if you don't get results right away, or if you don't even know you're supposed to get results, then, why bother? But if you've got a goal, and because of my humiliation, it's pretty important to develop a little humility at this point. So yeah, I've got a motivation, and I got a goal, a target, and it's reachable. It's doable. So I'm thankful that all of this just coalesced without any effort. It was just the right moment. I must have made the right decisions to come to this point. Something right for a change. But it's very worthwhile. It makes life a lot more bearable, which is a plus. Anyway, enough said, I guess.